Let's get started on today's notes over equation word problems. So when given a word problem, how can we use algebra to solve it? Now, word problems are typically very difficult for students, so we're going to follow these 4 steps for every problem that we are solving. The first thing that we're going to do is identify your variable or variables. There could be multiple, x equals y equals, you get it. Then the second thing we're going to do is set up an equation. Obviously, we're going to be using algebra to solve these word problems. Then we'll solve for the variable. And then we're going to state our conclusion using this fun little symbol right here, which means therefore. It's like the vertices of a triangle. It just means therefore, right? Therefore. The first set of word problems that we're going to look at are 2-step word problems. Y equals mx plus b is the general formula we're going to use when we're solving these 2-step word problems. When you're given a 2-step word problem, you're typically given some type of rate, which in this formula right here is what m represents, your rate. You're also given some base amount. We'll call that b. So that's b in this formula. X will be whatever we're looking at. Y is the total. Okay? So let's go through this problem, and I'm going to, what I call, mark it up. I'm going to mark it up. So I circle numbers, underline things. I just mark all over it. So it says the new gym in town offers a yearly membership with a $45 initial sign-up fee. If Tim paid $669 for the entire year, what was the monthly rate? We're looking for the monthly rate. The base amount is his initial sign-up fee, $45. So a base amount is just your standard, your base fee, your base amount. Then the total, we're also given a total here. He paid $669 for the entire year, $669. So what does X equal? If this says what was the monthly rate, we're looking for the monthly rate. So what is X equal? Per month, every month, each month. The rate goes in front of the X, and then that per month or every month or each month is what X is. So X is going to be the number of months. And in this case, because we're looking at an entire year, that's going to be 12. Okay, so let's set it up. So the first thing I'm going to do is write my formula down, and then I'm going to plug in my values where they go. Okay, so what can I replace Y with? 669 equals, well, we're looking for M, and we know X is going to be 12 because that's an entire year, and then the base fee is 45. And now we're just going to solve for M, which is our monthly rate. So let's do that. So what do I do in this 2-step equation here? I'm going to subtract 45. 669 minus 45 is 624. And then I'm going to write it correctly or proper like this, where you have the coefficient in front of the variable. And then what do I do at this point to solve for M? I'm going to divide by 12. And when I do that, I get 52. So I've identified my variables, I set up my equation, I solved my equation, and what's the last step that I need to do? I need to write my concluding statement using therefore. Therefore, the monthly rate was what? $52. The monthly rate was $52. So a lot of students think setting up this equation and solving it this way is difficult, right? You might have a way that you solve it in your head. And so this part right here of showing your work is what a lot of students really struggle with. So if you're in that category, completely understandable. Let's look at the second example. Matt earns a 20% commission rate selling software in addition to a monthly base salary of $5,000. Last month, his total income was $6,600. What was Matt's sales revenue last month? Okay, so there might be some vocabulary in this particular problem that you don't really know what it's talking about, so I'm going to walk you through it. So Matt earns a 20% commission rate. Well, one thing when you're in upper level math is whenever you see a percent, you really need to think of it in terms of a decimal. So that 20% is 0.2 as a decimal. So when we're solving a problem, we're going to use 0.2 in our problem because that's really what 20% is. It's 2/10. So if he earns this commission rate, that means whatever he sells, whatever Matt sells in software, he'll take a 20% cut, right? So let's say he sells $100, he'll earn 20%. So he also gets that in addition to his monthly base salary of $5,000. So that's just a base salary that he gets no matter what for just being in sales. So let's at least write that in here when we're labeling our variables. So he earns a 20% commission rate. So that's the rate, and that's 0.2. And his base amount is $5,000. Now, this 20% commission rate, this M, is what goes in front of the X, right? Y equals mx plus b. I've got a base amount plus a rate. If it's a commission rate, then that means whatever I'm multiplying it by is what he sells. We call that revenue, okay? So that's actually what we're looking for. We're looking for his sales revenue, which is X. His total income was $6,600. That's his total income. So we've at least identified our variables here, and now let's put them in our problem. And I'm going to switch colors here just to switch colors. So I'm going to replace Y with the total, which is $6,600. And then his commission rate is 0.2 times whatever he sells, whatever his revenue is for that month. And then he also gets a $5,000 base salary. So do you see how we've set it up? 0.2 times whatever he sells plus his $5,000 base salary, and that'll be $6,600. But now we have to undo this equation, solve for X, so we can see, well, how much did he sell last month? So let's solve it. What's our first step? I'm going to subtract 5,000 from both sides. Can I do this? Is it going to let me? I'm going to subtract 5,000 from both sides, and I'm left with 1,600 equals 0.2 times X. So how do I undo 0.2? Times X, I divide by 0.2. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. And then 1,600 divided by 0.2 is 8,000. So what's my concluding statement? Let's switch colors here. Therefore, Matt's revenue was $8,000 last month. Matt's revenue was $8,000 last month. So for his company, he sold $8,000 worth of his product, worth of his software. He got 20% of that plus his base salary of $5,000. In set 2 of our examples, we're going to be finding two numbers. And a general rule that will help you as you're working through these problems is to let X equal the thing mentioned last. So I'm going to read through problem number 3. The larger of two numbers is 8 more than 3 times the smaller number. If the sum of the numbers is 52, find the numbers. So if we're going to let X equal the thing mentioned last, what was mentioned last? Smaller number. That's exactly what I'm going to let X equal. So if the smaller number is X, then the larger number is, let's put this in terms of X, meaning I'm going to have X somewhere in my expression here. So if the larger of two numbers is 8 more than 3 times the smaller number, 8 more than 3 times the smaller number. That's what that would look like. We've translated words into math. 3 times X plus 8. So now we've got our expressions here. Let's come up with an equation. How do we do that? If the sum of the numbers is 52, well, what does that mean? Sum is the answer to an addition problem. So if I add the smaller number, which is X, plus the larger number, which is 3X plus 8, what's my sum? 52. Well, we've got our equation. Now let's solve for x. The first thing I need to do is combine like terms on the left side. So I get 4x plus 8 equals 52. And then what do I do at this point? I've just got a two-step equation here now. Subtract 8. 4x equals 44. And then divide by 4. And I get x equals 11. But am I done? No, I just have one number here. I have what x equals. That's the smaller number. How could I figure out the larger number? Well, if x equals 11, anywhere I see x, I can replace it with 11. I see x right there. So here's how I replace. Instead of 3 times x, I'm going to replace x with parentheses. And then whatever I'm replacing x with, I'm going to plug into those parentheses. I'm replacing it with 11, so it looks like that. And then let's solve. 3 times 11 is 33. And 33 plus 8 is 41. Therefore, the numbers are 11 and 41. There you go. Let's go on to the next one. Number 4. The smaller of two numbers is 1/3 the larger number. If 5 is added to the smaller number, the result is 3 more than the larger number. Find the two numbers. Whew, that's a lot of words. And that's what students struggle with. Well, we know we're going to let x equal the thing mentioned last. The thing mentioned last is larger number. So we're going to let the larger number equal x, which means the smaller number is, we're going to put this in terms of x. Let's see if we can get that in the first sentence here. The smaller of two numbers is, I like to say when I see the word is, there's an equal sign there. So the smaller of two numbers is 1/3 the larger number. 1/3 the larger number. 1/3 of the larger number. Could be that too. 1/3 times x. So now we have our expressions. Let's come up with our equation. If 5 is added to the smaller number, okay, 1/3 x plus 5. Let's go ahead and add 5 to it. The result is equals 3 more than the larger number. So that means the larger number plus 3. Find the two numbers. Now I have my equation. If I have my one equation and one variable, can I solve for that variable? Sure. But one thing I don't like is this fraction right here. So you might have seen in a previous video of mine how you can get rid of fractions when you're solving an equation. In this case, I only have one fraction and my denominator is 3. So to get rid of that denominator, I can multiply everything by 3. I can't just multiply that one term by 3. I have to multiply both sides of my equation by 3. And if you multiply everything by 3 and what you do to one side, you do to the other, you're never wrong. Your equation is still balanced. So when we do this, we get rid of that denominator in that fraction, and I'm just left with x. But now I'm multiplying 3 times 5, which is 15, equals 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times 3 is 9. And now I've got an equation that represents the same amount, it's still balanced, and if I solve for x, I would get the exact same thing as if I didn't multiply that 3 into every term. So let's do it. I can subtract 3x from both sides, and I get negative 2x plus 15 equals 9. So what do I do at this point? I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. Negative 2x equals negative 6. And then my last and final step is what? Divide both sides by negative 2. So I get x equals 3. That's one number. X equals 3. That's the larger number. How could I then find the smaller number? Well, if x equals 3, anywhere I see x, I can replace it with 3. So instead of 1/3 times x, I'm going to get 1/3 times 3. And then what is 1/3 of 3? It's 1. Therefore, the numbers are 1 and 3. If you're struggling with these word problems, you're like most students out there. So Word problems are typically pretty difficult, and they've been difficult for forever. So let's go on to the next problem. The Dallas Cowboys scored 10 more than twice the number of points the Philadelphia Eagles scored. The team scored 52 points altogether. How much did each team score? So this is actually still kind of like a finding two numbers example, but it's a little more real world. The Dallas Cowboys scored 10 more than twice the number of points the Philadelphia Eagles scored. Well, what was mentioned last? Philadelphia Eagles, that's what we'll let equal X. So let Eagles equal X, which means the Cowboys is going to be in terms of X, in terms of the Eagles score. They scored 10 more, plus 10, than twice the number of points the Philadelphia Eagles scored. Twice a number means I'm going to multiply it by 2. Then I also know they scored 52 points all together. So if I take the Eagles score and I add it to the Cowboys score, I'm going to get 52. And what do I do at this point? I solve for X. So the first thing I need to do is combine like terms. 3x plus 10 equals 52. And now I've just got a basic old two-step equation. Subtract 10 from both sides, and then divide by 3. And I get x equals 14. But am I done? No, that's just the number of points that the Eagles scored. How could I then determine the points that the Cowboys scored? Well, if x equals 14, anywhere I see x, I can replace it with 14. I see x right there, so I replace it with parentheses. And then I'm going to put 14 inside those parentheses, and then simplify. 2 times 14 is 28, plus 10 is 38. Therefore, the Eagles scored 14 points, and the Cowboys scored 38 points. All right, moving right along. Let's move on to perimeter word problems. In this last set of examples, we're going to be looking at perimeter word problems. When I talk about perimeter, I mean of this shape, which is a rectangle. So in a rectangle, you have two pairs of opposite and congruent sides that are parallel to one another. Okay, so because of that, we have this formula right here. The perimeter of a rectangle is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So let's look at number 6. The length of a rectangle is 4 feet more than 5 times its width. Okay, well, I have the width here, and I know the length of a rectangle is. The length of a rectangle is. When I see that word is, I think equation or equal sign. So the length of a rectangle is 4 feet more, so something plus 4, than 5 times its width. So 5 times W. Okay, find the dimensions if the perimeter is 56 feet. Okay, so that's all the information that we're given. I know the perimeter of a rectangle is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. Let's fill in what we know. I know the perimeter is 56 feet. So I can replace this P right here with 56. That's something that I know. I also know the length in terms of the width. So watch what I do here. I'm going to replace this L right here with what L equals. So the first thing I'm going to do is replace it with parentheses. Everything else stays. Inside those parentheses, I'm going to put what L equals. 5W plus 4. Now I have one equation, one variable. I can solve for it. I can't solve one equation with two different variables. I can only solve one equation with one variable. So now let's solve it. What do? I need to simplify this side by distributing this 2. So 56 equals 10W plus 8 plus 2W. And now I'm going to combine like terms. 10W plus 2W is 12W plus 8 equals 56. If I'm going too fast or too slow, you can always pause the video, fast forward, rewind, whatever you need to do. So now we've just got a two-step equation here. I'm going to subtract 8. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. And I get 48 equals 12 times W. And then at this point, what am I going to do? Divide by 12. And I get W equals 4. That means the width is 4. If W is 4, anywhere I see 4, like right, or W, sorry, anywhere I see W, I can replace it with 4. I see W right there. So instead of 5 times W, I'm going to replace it with parentheses. And I'm going to put what W equals inside those parentheses, which is 4. And now we're just going to simplify it. 5 times 4 is 20. 20 plus 4 is 24. And now I have my dimensions. So we can write that down. Therefore, the dimensions are 4 and 24 feet, or 4 by 24 feet, however you want to write it. And if you want to say the width is 4 and the length is 24, that's fine. Okay, or feet. The width is 4 feet and the length is 24 feet. That's fine. Okay, let's move on to our last example. It's another perimeter problem, perimeter of a rectangle. It says the length of a rectangle is 3 inches less than 4 times its width. If the perimeter is 84 inches, find the dimensions. Okay, the length of a rectangle is, right? There's that is equal sign. 3 inches less than, oh, there's one of those turnaround phrases. 3 inches less than 4 times its width. So that means 4 times its width, and 3 inches less than that is going to look like that. So in those turnaround phrases, a lot of students want to write 3 minus 4W. It doesn't really work like that. Okay, this is one of those turnaround phrases. So 4W minus 3. We also know the perimeter is 84. Since we're talking about a rectangle, I'm going to use 2L plus 2W is P, and then I'm going to replace everything with what I know. So what do I know? I know the perimeter is 84, so I'm going to replace P with 84, and I know the length is 4W minus 3. So if I replace this variable right here, instead of 2 times L, I'm going to replace it with 4W minus 3. What I have created is one equation, one variable. And we say this, whenever we say this, we say we've got our length in terms of our width. And now we're just going to solve this equation. So I need to distribute this 2, and I get 8W minus 6 plus 2W. And then at this point, I'm going to combine like terms. 8W and 2W is what? 10W. And then now I need to add 6 to both sides. I'm just solving a two-step equation here. And then my last and final step, what am I going to do? Divide both sides by 10. W equals 9. So now I have my width. How could I now determine the length? Well, if W equals 9, anywhere you see W, you can replace it with 9. So the first thing I'm going to do is replace it with parentheses. And then inside those parentheses, I'm going to put what W equals, which is 9. And now I'm just going to simplify it. 4 times 9 is 36. 36 minus 3 is 33. And I have my two dimensions, so let's put it in the format that I've asked. Therefore, the dimensions are 9 by 33 feet. 9 feet by 33 feet. There you go. And that concludes your notes over using algebra to solve word problems. I hope it was helpful.